The sharp smell of chemicals and the freezing air conditioning that cut straight through to my bones burned my skin. I lay powerless on an emergency gurney, covered with worn sheets. Every time I breathed, it felt as if a massive stone were crushing my chest. Beside me, the heart monitor emitted slow beeps, just like my hope, which was slowly fading away. "Miss Valerie Reed, I need an answer right now," the administrative employee said without a trace of compassion. The woman, dressed in a white uniform, stood at the foot of the bed holding a clipboard. She was not looking at me but at the invoice. "Your insurance card was declined for exceeding the limit, and the initial deposit was not covered either." I turned my head with difficulty toward my husband, Robert Pierce, who stood beside the bed. His face showed concern, but his appearance was flawless. His shirt was perfectly pressed and his hair slicked neatly back. He looked ready for a party, not to accompany his dying wife. "Honey," I called him in a dry, broken voice. Robert let out a deep sigh. It was his usual gesture when he felt I was a burden. "Valerie, hold on a little longer. I'll do what I can. You know how things are." It was the same promise he had made hours earlier. "If payment is not made within the next 30 minutes, we will have to move you," the employee interrupted. "This bed is needed for another emergency patient whose paperwork is already complete." Her words struck me like a slap. There I was, not a person, just an obstacle to the hospital's business. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks, the only part of my body that still felt any warmth. Robert tightened his grip on the phone he was holding. I saw the screen light up for an instant. There was a message. It was brief, but before I could see who it was from, he quickly turned the screen off. "I'm going to see if I can get a loan," he said. He leaned down and gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, cold and rushed. "I know a lender nearby. The interest rates are high, but there's no other option. Valerie, for you I don't care if I ruin myself as long as you live." His words sounded sweet, but his gaze was not on me. It went to his watch and then toward the exit. "Please don't take too long. I'm scared," I whispered. "Yes, don't worry. Wait for me here." Without looking back, Robert walked quickly out of the emergency room. His steps were far too light for someone desperate to find money. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. The pain in my abdomen intensified, as if an invisible hand were twisting my insides. But that physical suffering was nothing compared to the anguish of realizing that Robert was not coming back. The hospital's calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. The same administrative employee returned, this time accompanied by 2 burly security guards. "Time's up, ma'am," she said coldly. "We can't locate your husband. This bed is needed for a traffic accident victim who has just been admitted." "But I'm sick," I managed to say. "We are not a charity. Wait outside or in the lobby until a family member completes the payment." My gurney was pushed without consideration toward the outside. Not into a room but into a hallway near the exit, dusty and filled with cold drafts. People passing by looked at me with a mixture of pity and rejection. I felt like trash, discarded for being useless. In that moment I understood that Robert had not gone to get money. He had abandoned me. He left me there to die slowly, to rid himself of my enormous medical expenses. A dark despair began to devour me from the inside. My vision blurred. The edges closed in. Maybe this was how everything ended. "God, if I have to go, take me now. I'm so tired." Suddenly, the noise of the hospital stopped. Through the main entrance came 5 large men, dressed in luxurious black suits. Their presence was so imposing that even the guards stepped aside. In the middle of them walked a middle-aged man with gray hair and a solid build. His face was stern, and his eyes scanned the place as if searching for something invaluable. The sound of his shoes echoed against the hospital's cheap floor. Tap, tap, tap. Each step was firm, commanding. My heart beat weakly. Were they angels of death? The man stopped in front of my battered gurney and looked at me. His hard expression softened and his eyes filled with tears. Without caring about the dirty floor, the man in the expensive suit knelt beside me. He took my hand, covered in needle marks, and as if I were a queen, kissed it respectfully. His shoulders trembled as he held back his tears. "Who are you?" I asked, barely able to speak. He lifted his face. Tears ran down his lined but clean cheeks. He looked at me with deep guilt. "Forgive me, miss," he said in a trembling voice. "I am cross. I'm sorry I arrived so late. I have just completed the paperwork to acquire this hospital and to make sure you receive the best treatment possible." I opened my mouth, stunned. Cross turned toward the hospital director, who had come running, pale and visibly shaken. Without standing up, he gave an icy order that made the entire staff tremble. "Prepare the presidential suite. Bring in the best specialists from abroad immediately. If a single hair on Miss Reed's head falls because of your negligence, tomorrow this hospital will be nothing but ashes." Then he looked back at me. His gaze concealed an enormous secret. "Miss Valerie Reed, your husband did not only abandon you. He also stole something that had belonged to you since the day you were born." What did those words mean? What had Robert been hiding from me all this time? The white light I had mistaken for the threshold of the afterlife began to fade, transforming into the warm glow of a crystal chandelier. The nauseating smell of chemicals and blood disappeared. In its place floated a soft scent of lilies and lavender. My body no longer felt the hardness of the emergency gurney. Now I rested on a bed so soft it seemed to cradle my fragile bones. I blinked. The ceiling was high, adorned with intricate moldings. In one corner, a cream-colored leather sofa looked unbelievably comfortable. It was another world, far removed from the plastic chairs where Robert used to make me wait for hours whenever I went to get my medication. "Are you feeling better, miss?" asked a deep, calm voice filled with respect. I slowly turned my head. The middle-aged man, Cross, was still there. He stood upright beside a massive window overlooking the nighttime glow of Chicago, Illinois. His black suit remained impeccable, but his face no longer carried the hardness from before. Now it looked calmer. "Where am I?" I asked. My voice was still rough, but thanks to the oxygen tube in my nose, breathing felt much easier. "On the top floor of this building, miss," he replied. "The executive floor, reserved for the owning family of the Sullivan Medical Group. The place that always belonged to you." As he spoke, Cross stepped closer. He poured warm water into a crystal glass and offered it to me carefully, helping me drink through a straw. The water soothed my throat and cleared my mind a little, though his words only confused me further. "Sullivan Medical Group, my place?" I murmured. "Mr. Cross, I think you're mistaken. I am Valerie Reed, just an orphan who grew up in an orphanage on the outskirts of the city." My memory drifted back. My husband, Robert, always said that because I had no roots I attracted bad luck. I remembered the day of my first diagnosis 2 months earlier. We were in our small rented apartment, the walls damp with moisture. Robert threw the results onto the wobbly dining table. "Look at this, Valerie. A rich person's disease in a poor woman's body," he shouted, his eyes red not with sadness but with rage. "It has to be the fault of your unknown parents' genes. A carrier of misfortune. It wasn't enough that you were an orphan and a burden. Now you're going to ruin me. I should have listened to my mother when she told me not to marry you." Those words burned into my memory. I believed him. I believed I was a burden, that not having parents made me second-rate, destined to suffer. Cross let out a deep sigh as if he had read my thoughts. He pulled a thick leather folder from inside his jacket and slowly placed it over my legs. "Your husband is a cruel and very cunning liar, miss," he said. Every time he mentioned Robert, his voice turned cold. "You were not abandoned by fate. 25 years ago, there was a mass kidnapping of newborns from the maternity ward of this very hospital, which at the time belonged to your grandfather. You disappeared. Your mother died a year later from the shock, and your grandfather spent the rest of his life searching for you. His only granddaughter." With trembling hands I opened the folder. Inside was an old photograph of a baby with a crescent-shaped birthmark on her left shoulder. The same birthmark I had. Beneath it lay a DNA test report dated 3 years earlier. My eyes widened. 3 years ago? But I only met you today. You didn't take that test, Cross interrupted, his jaw tight. Look at the name of the applicant. My finger traced the document. There it was. A name I knew far too well, the name I had always respected as the head of my family. Applicant, Robert Pierce. I felt my world shatter for the second time. Robert, he knew. The tears returned, But now they were not only from sadness. They carried sharp pain and unbearable confusion. He knew who you were 3 years ago, Cross continued, when he accidentally found old adoption records at the Sacred Heart Orphanage where you grew up. In secret, he took a sample of your hair and compared it against the database of missing persons we had circulated. Cross clenched his fists, holding back his rage. He told no one. Not us and not you. He kept the information as an ace up his sleeve. He waited until your grandfather, Albert Sullivan, president of the Sullivan Medical Group, passed away last month. According to the will, if the granddaughter did not appear, all assets would be frozen. I swallowed hard. But if the granddaughter were found dead, her husband or legal heir could claim an indemnity compensation of several $1,000,000. The air left my lungs. A violent wave of nausea turned my stomach. All that time Robert wasn't just negligent. He was waiting for me to die. He let your illness progress, Cross continued. He refused to take you to specialists, gave you only basic medication and psychologically pressured you to give up. Every insult, every accusation of bad luck, was part of a plan to break you and speed up your death. He didn't go looking for any loan, miss. He picked up the remote and turned on the television. The wall-mounted screen showed footage from the hospital parking garage security cameras. Robert could be seen calmly walking toward a red sedan parked in a dark area. The door opened and a young woman in a tight dress welcomed him. They got in, kissed, and the car sped away, leaving me agonizing in the emergency room. That woman, is she? I asked, my voice hollow. The secretary from the office where Robert claimed he was fired 6 months ago, Cross replied. In reality, he was still working there and was recently promoted. Her name is Paula. The pain in my body vanished abruptly, replaced by a fire of rage burning in my chest. My sincere love over 5 years of marriage had turned into a slow poison. He abandoned me when I needed him most, for another woman and for the inheritance he expected to collect after my death. I looked at Cross. The compassion in my eyes was gone. In its place grew a resolve as hard as steel. Mr. Cross, I called out. Yes, Mississippi. All the facilities of this hospital and your grandfather's fortune now belong to you. You are the sole owner of the Sullivan Medical Group and all of its real estate assets. With a single signature, I could buy my husband's pride 1,000 times over, I said, gripping the silk sheets until my knuckles turned white. So don't call me miss anymore. Help me recover. I want to see Robert Pierce's face when he discovers that the corpse he left behind can rise from the grave. Cross allowed himself a faint, knowing smile and bowed respectfully. As you wish, President Reed. But first, there is something else you should see in your personal account, which we have just activated. Robert was careless enough to leave a digital trail. What else was that angel with a demon's face hiding? 2 weeks passed like a beautiful, hazy dream. I no longer woke up with rain dripping onto my face through a leaking roof, nor to the shouts of debt collectors pounding on the metal door of our old apartment. Now each morning I was awakened by sunlight filtering through thick silk curtains and the aroma of an exquisite broth served on a silver tray. The medical team summoned by Cross worked with remarkable efficiency. The surgery to remove the toxins from my body was a success. The inflammation in my kidneys and liver was not due to a genetic disease, but to a foreign substance that had accumulated in my system. I felt a new energy coursing through me, as if my once fragile body had finally decided to live. Thanks to vitamin infusions and the intensive care of a dedicated team of nurses, color returned to my cheeks, once pale as a corpse's. That morning, for the first time, Cross allowed me to stand without a wheelchair. This way, President Reed. I ordered the bathroom mirror replaced with a larger one so you can see your true self. I stepped into the bathroom, which was twice the size of our former apartment. My bare feet touched warm marble. In front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I lost my breath. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. My hair, once dry and brittle, now fell in glossy black waves down my back. My skin, once rough, was hydrated and luminous. My cheekbones, previously hollowed by malnutrition, now looked firm and elegant, framing eyes that were alert, filled with questions instead of fear. This is you. The true face of the granddaughter of the Sullivan Medical Group, Cross said proudly from the doorway. Poverty and suffering hid it for a time, but blood never lies. I turned toward him. The amazement faded, replaced by the bitter reality of betrayal. You said Robert left a digital trail, I said, getting straight to the point. I sat on the sofa with my back straight, a new posture that came instinctively. Cross nodded, took out a tablet and placed it in front of me. The screen displayed bank statements and online purchase records. We tracked your husband's phone activity, or rather your ex-husband's, starting from the night he abandoned you in the emergency room. Look at this. My eyes widened at the numbers. At the very moment I was agonizing and he claimed he was going to borrow money, Robert spent $2,000 at a luxury jewelry boutique in downtown Chicago, Illinois. He told me we didn't even have money to pay the electricity bill, I murmured. That we had to fast on Mondays and Thursdays to save. And yet he had $18,000 in a secret account. Cross continued mercilessly. Also, take a look at these taxi records. The history showed a consistent pattern. Every time he said he was working nights or weekends, he was actually heading to a luxury apartment in the Gold Coast, Chicago. It wasn't the office or the factory, I whispered. Vista Hermosa Apartments 1208. Rented under Paula's name, the secretary you saw on the cameras. Cross confirmed. With trembling hands I picked up the new phone that had been left on the table. The old one with its cracked screen had already been discarded. I dialed Robert's number, the one I knew by heart. A cold tone answered. The number was unavailable. I tried again. Nothing. He had changed his number. To him, the poor, sick Valerie Reed already belonged to the past. I set the phone aside. This time I didn't cry. I felt a calm, lethal coldness. Mr. Cross, I called. Yes, President. What is the total amount of liquid assets I can access today? He typed on the tablet and showed it to me. The figure had so many zeros that I had to count them twice. Your access is unlimited. Your Sullivan Private Wealth Black Card was activated this morning. I stood and walked back to the mirror. This time I didn't see a victim. I saw a predator who had just awakened. Prepare the car, I ordered. And tell the tech team to track the location of Robert's new phone. Cross smiled. This time his smile was unsettling. We already have him located, President. He's at the Elysian Club right now. Perfect, I said, taking the soft coat draped over a chair. Let's go there. But not as Valerie Reed, Robert Pierce's wife. That woman died in a hospital hallway. And how will you introduce yourself? Cross asked. I turned and formed a cold smile. On the tablet screen, a red dot blinked, marking Robert's location. Outside, the black sedan glided through the wet streets of Chicago, Illinois. Inside the car, scented with premium leather, I watched the city in silence through the tinted windows. I used to watch luxury cars like this from the suffocating, dusty windows of public transportation, counting coins in my bag to buy something for dinner. Now I sat inside as the owner of the car, yet my heart felt emptier than when I had nothing. We've arrived at our destination, President, Cross said, breaking the silence. The personal chauffeur opened the door. We stopped in front of a tall building crowned by a striking neon sign that read the Elysian Club. It was the most exclusive club in the city, a place where officials and business executives spent in a single night what used to cost me an entire year to survive. I stepped out of the car. The night air brushed my face, now framed by elegant makeup. The black silk dress wrapped around my body moved softly, and the high heels forced me to maintain a firm posture. I was no longer the Valerie of before, the one who walked with her head down, intimidated by everything. The burly doormen who once inspired fear, bowed when they saw Cross behind me. Without any checks, they guided us through a private corridor leading to a section of exclusive balconies on the second level, with a direct view of the dance floor. The music made my chest vibrate and the lights spun endlessly. But my eyes were fixed on a single point among the VIP tables below. There was Robert Pierce. He was wearing a shiny gray suit I had never seen on him before. On his wrist, a gold watch flashed with every movement. There was not a trace of sadness in the man who had left his wife agonizing in a hospital 2 weeks earlier. On the contrary, he was smiling. A wide smile showing all his teeth. The same smile that, in my darkest moments, had once calmed me now sounded like the edge of a knife scraping against my ears. Beside him sat a woman in a deep red dress. "Pa." She clung shamelessly to his arm. She whispered something into his ear and he laughed even louder. "Mr. Cross," I murmured without taking my eyes off them. "Is the listening device working?" "Yes, President," he replied calmly. "One of my men placed a microphone under their table 10 minutes ago." I put the earpiece into my right ear. Instantly, the roar of the music faded away. In its place, the conversation at that table filled my ears, clear and sharp as if I were sitting right there with them. "Honey, are you sure that Valerie woman is really dead?" Paula's syrupy voice asked. I held my breath and gripped the railing. Robert's voice sounded careless, soaked in alcohol. "Of course she is. Do you really think she could have survived? Her kidneys were destroyed, her liver inflamed, and she didn't have a cent. The hospital must have already handed her over to social services or cremated her as an unidentified body." My blood boiled. I turned off my phone on purpose so they wouldn't be able to charge me anything for handling the body. He hadn't just abandoned me. He hadn't even planned to claim my body if I had truly died. "You're awful." Paula laughed, her tone more seductive than critical. "So when can we collect the insurance? You said Valerie's life insurance was $3,500,000. "Patience," Robert replied. "Let's wait one more month so we don't raise suspicion. I'll go to the hospital, pretend to cry a little and get the death certificate. Then the $3,500,000 will come through and we'll leave for somewhere else in Europe just like we planned. No more parasitic wife draining resources." Tears streamed down my face, not from sadness but from deep revulsion. All that time behind my back he had been paying the premiums on an outrageously expensive life insurance policy in my name, while claiming we didn't even have money for basic necessities. That poison had tried to kill me for $3,500,000. I looked down again. Robert raised his glass. "To our future, Paula, and to Valerie who made my life miserable for 5 years. May she burn in hell." They clinked their glasses and laughed uncontrollably. Without realizing it, I squeezed my wine glass so tightly that it shattered in my hand. The shards cut into my palm and blood spilled onto the carpet. Cross rushed over immediately with a handkerchief. "President, your hand." "Leave it," I said coldly. The sting in my palm brought me back to clarity. That pain reminded me I was still alive. I watched the blood soak into the white cloth. The same red as that woman's dress. The same color as my husband's rotten ambition. "Mr. Cross," I said, holding back my fury. "Yes, President Reed." I tilted my chin toward Robert, dancing drunkenly below. "Who owns this building? Who owns the club where that filth is enjoying himself?" Cross checked his tablet for a few seconds. "The building belongs to a business partner of the Sullivan Medical Group, President. The lease expires next month and the owner urgently needs liquidity." I smiled faintly. It was a smile I had never worn before in my life. The smile of a predator who has just located her prey. "Buy it," I ordered coldly. "Acquire this building tonight. Double the price if necessary, but I want the title in my name before dawn." Cross looked surprised, though admiration shone in his eyes. "It will be done immediately." "And what is your plan once the building is yours, President?" he asked. I looked at Robert Pierce, drunk and dancing with Paula. Laughing, building their happiness on my suffering. "Tomorrow morning, make sure Robert Pierce receives a special invitation from the new owner of this building," I whispered harshly. "Tell him there is a mysterious investor interested in his so-called business. I want him to crawl to me and place his own neck into the noose I've prepared." I turned away and left the balcony behind. I walked with my back straight. Valerie Reed, the woman who cried, had died along with the shards of glass. From that moment on, the game had begun and the dice were in my hands. "Proceed," I told Cross as he opened the door. "Understood, President." That morning, the sun over Chicago, Illinois felt different. It wasn't the burning heat that scorched my skin when I walked to the market, but a gentle warmth reflected in the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 40th floor of Sullivan Tower, the building that now belonged to me. I stood in front of the large mirror in the main office. My image had changed completely. My black hair was styled into a modern bun, revealing a long neck adorned with a diamond necklace worth more than my former rent. A professional makeup artist had sculpted my face with precision, defining my jawline and gaze, erasing any trace of the poor wife I once was. My body was wrapped in a dark red tailored suit, created by a renowned designer. It radiated flawless, unquestionable authority. "The meeting is scheduled in 5 minutes, President Regina," Cross whispered from the doorway. I had chosen the name Regina. It sounded familiar yet more elegant. A name destined to become Robert's nightmare. "Send him in," I ordered, turning the large chair to face the window and look out over the city. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from adrenaline. I was about to come face to face with my husband again. The double wooden doors opened. I heard unsteady footsteps entering the wide, cold office. "Good morning." "Excuse me," Robert said with a nervousness I had rarely heard in his voice. Cross greeted him politely. "Mr. Pierce, welcome. Please have a seat. President Regina is expecting you." I heard the chair scrape against the floor. I let the silence stretch. I let the anxiety consume him. In business, and in revenge, the one who knows how to wait always wins. I slowly turned the chair. When my face came into view, I saw the impact. His eyes widened, his mouth fell slightly open. He scanned me from head to toe with hunger and admiration. He did not see Valerie Reed. He saw money. He saw power. He saw an elite woman far beyond his reach. His mind could not connect the imposing figure in front of him with the disheveled wife he had left to die in the emergency room. Poverty had worn away my features. Wealth instead had sculpted me like marble. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce," I greeted him, using a deeper, firmer voice without the soft tone I had used at home. "Good morning, President Regina," he stammered. He hurried to adjust his cheap tie, trying to appear dignified. "It's an honor that an investor like you would summon me. I was very surprised when your secretary contacted me this morning. I've heard you're seeking financing for a real estate project," I remarked, flipping through the fake proposal he had presented to several banks, all of them except me. "That's right, President. I have a great vision," he began smoothly. "With the right partner, we'll double the profits in a year." I gave a faint smile. "Visions are cheap, Mr. Pierce. I need guarantees." I stood up and walked around the desk, approaching him at a slow pace. Robert looked hypnotized as my perfume filled the air. He swallowed when I stopped less than 3 feet away. "I'm willing to invest $12 million in your new company," I said calmly. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. "$12 million? There's one condition," I interrupted. "Whatever it is, President," he replied without thinking. Greed had completely clouded his judgment. "I need someone capable of taking risks," I continued. "This contract states that if the project fails in 6 months, all of your personal assets, including future ones, such as insurance policies or any inheritance you may receive, will become the property of my company, with an additional interest of 50%. I stared straight into his eyes. He had the nerve to sign. Robert hesitated for barely a second. No doubt he was calculating the $3,500,000 from the life insurance policy in my name. In his mind, it was guaranteed money. He believed that if the business failed, he could settle any debt with the money obtained from his wife's death. The irony was almost poetic. "I have what it takes, President," he said firmly. "I'm sure this project will be a success." "Good." I handed him a gold fountain pen. When Robert reached out, our fingers brushed. The air tightened. He pulled his hand back for a brief instant, frowning as he studied me closely. "Excuse me, President, have we met before?" he asked hesitantly. "Your eyes remind me of someone." For a second my heart stopped. But I regained my composure immediately. I laughed softly, light, elegant. "Perhaps you've seen me in business magazines or at some reception," I replied indifferently. My face tends to look familiar to those who harbor certain fantasies. He didn't catch the sarcasm. Robert let out an awkward laugh, embarrassed at having compared a powerful investor to someone from his past. "Of course not," he said. "The woman I knew was a disgrace. She can't be compared to an angel like you, President." He signed the contract quickly. That word pierced my chest. Disgrace. It's now valid, I said, collecting the documents. The trap was closed and his neck was already inside it. Robert stood up to shake my hand. Thank you for your trust, President Regina. I won't disappoint you. To celebrate our partnership, may I invite you to dinner? The audacity. His wife hadn't even been officially declared dead, and he was already flirting without shame. I took his hand. My grip was firm, stronger than necessary. I felt the bones in his fingers give slightly. Save that money, Mr. Pierce, I replied deliberately. You'll find it very useful later. Now leave. I'm busy. He walked out with his face glowing as if he had just won the lottery. He had no idea he had just signed his own sentence. When the door closed, Cross came back in. An impeccable performance, President. He's completely fallen for it. I looked at the palm of the hand I had used to shake his. I felt the urge to wash it with acid. This is only the beginning, Mr. Cross, I said coldly. Proceed with phase 2. Make the project appear successful during the first month and starting with the second, begin to sink it slowly. And one more thing. Yes, President. Send something to our old apartment. Make it look like it's from an old friend he forgot. I want to see him panic. The game of cat and mouse was becoming more interesting by the minute. The toxicology specialist's office on the hospital's restricted floor was wrapped in a heavy silence. The only sound was the ticking of the clock, in rhythm with the irregular beats of my heart. Across from me, Dr. Stephen Thomas, the leading poison expert Cross had brought in directly from Singapore, reviewed the results with a furrowed brow. President Regina, he said cautiously. He removed his glasses and looked at me with an expression that blended compassion and horror. When we analyzed your hair, your nails, and the kidney tissue samples recently extracted, we found something abnormal. I gripped my bag tightly. Tell me straight, doctor. Is it cancer? Is the kidney failure permanent? He slowly shook his head. It's not cancer, and your condition is not due to a degenerative disease or your diet. He handed me a sheet where a red graph spiked alarmingly upward. We detected extremely high levels of arsenic in your body. This was not accidental exposure. The pattern indicates it was administered in small doses, regularly and daily for at least the last 6 months. I felt the world come to a halt. Arsenic? I whispered. Rat poison? Are you saying someone was poisoning me? My mouth went dry. I tasted that same metallic bitter flavor at the back of my tongue again. Exactly, he confirmed. Arsenic has no smell or taste and dissolves well in hot liquids. The symptoms mimic common illnesses: nausea, vomiting, hair loss, skin darkening, and progressive organ damage. Whoever did this was meticulous. He didn't want you to die quickly. He wanted it to look like a natural death and avoid an autopsy. My blood burned. My memory drifted back to the small, damp kitchen of our old apartment. For the past 6 months, every night Robert Pierce had been especially attentive. Valerie, drink this herbal tea. It was expensive, but it will help you get better. I remembered him saying, handing me a cup with a warm, cloudy liquid. He always waited until I swallowed the very last drop. I remembered his smile when I grimaced to hold back the nausea. I thought it was tenderness. In reality, it was the satisfaction of a killer watching his victim swallow the bait. Robert Pierce. I groaned softly. The name tasted repulsive. Cross, who had been standing to the side, stepped forward. His face was flushed with restrained fury. That miserable bastard. No wonder he was so certain you would die and refused to seek further treatment. He knew exactly what he was giving you. He didn't just abandon me, I whispered as tears of rage fell. He tried to kill me. My husband, the man who slept beside me, was poisoning me while telling me he loved me. The pain of the earlier betrayal was nothing compared to this. This was pure evil. Robert was not human. He was a demon wearing a mask. He wasn't caring for me out of love, I continued, but to make sure he gave me the correct dose. I wiped my tears away roughly. Doctor, is this evidence enough to put him in prison? It's enough to open an investigation, he replied, but to charge him with attempted premeditated murder, the police will need physical evidence. The container that held the poison or traces of the drink. I froze. The jar. I exclaimed. There's a glass jar in the upper kitchen cabinet of the old apartment. Robert said it was a special herbal powder that couldn't be exposed to light. It was half full when I was taken to the hospital. I turned immediately toward Cross. Mr. Cross, has that apartment already been cleared out by Robert? Cross checked his phone quickly. Not yet, President. According to the field team's report, Robert hasn't returned since you were hospitalized. He's been too busy spending money at his new apartment. But there is a problem. The lease expires the day after tomorrow. The owner has threatened to throw everything out if the belongings aren't removed. My heart started racing again. If the landlord cleaned that place out and threw the jar away, the key proof that Robert had poisoned me would disappear forever. Without that jar, he could claim I was poisoned by street food or invent any other excuse. I jumped to my feet, ignoring the slight dizziness. Prepare the car. We're going to that apartment right now, I ordered. President, your condition is still not stable enough to expose you to emotional shock or such an unsanitary environment. Cross tried to stop me, worried. Security. I shouted. Rage restored my strength instantly. My life had nearly ended in that man's hands. I was not going to let him get away with it out of fear of getting dirty. I would collect the evidence of his crime myself. Cross held my gaze for a second, then nodded in silence. 1 hour later, the luxury sedans stopped at the entrance to a narrow, muddy alley. The sky was heavy with clouds, mirroring my mood. Neighbors stared distrustfully at the gleaming car parked there. They would never imagine that inside was the woman they had always whispered about for being poor. I put on a black mask and a wide-brimmed hat that covered almost my entire face. I scanned the surroundings carefully. Cross and 2 bodyguards prepared to get out. Wait here. Only Mr. Cross and I will go in. We draw too much attention. I whispered. We moved down the alley, which smelled of sewage. My steps were steady as I headed toward 13B Bitter Lane. The rusted iron door looked the same. The peeling paint too. It was the place where I had been dying slowly. Cross forced the lock easily. The door opened with a painful creak. A damp smell hit us head-on. The interior was in disarray. My old clothes lay scattered across the floor. Robert had clearly emptied the closet, searching for any cash I might have hidden. I went straight to the kitchen. My heart felt like it was beating in my hand as I grabbed the handle of the old upper cabinet. Please God, I murmured. Let the evidence still be here. I opened the door. It was empty. My breath caught. The shelf was completely bare. The glass jar with the lethal powder was gone. Damn it, I whispered. It looks like he already threw it out, President, Cross said, touching my shoulder and pointing to an overturned plastic trash bin in the corner. Among instant food wrappers and rotting waste, shards of glass glinted. Mixed in with them was a yellowish-white powder, already clumped from moisture. I dropped to my knees without thinking. I didn't care that my expensive dress was stained by the greasy floor. Using a handkerchief, I carefully gathered the remaining powder. This is it, I whispered, my voice shaking. His murder weapon. Just as I was about to stand, the sound of a motorcycle came to a stop in front of the gate. Sound far too familiar. I forgot my keys, I heard Robert complain from outside. Footsteps approached the front door. Cross and I were trapped in the kitchen. There was no other exit. The door my husband, the cold-blooded killer, was about to open. How was I going to get out of there without him discovering who I was? Cross's breathing became a tense whisper beside my ear. His firm hand gripped my arm and pulled me toward the narrow bathroom just off the kitchen. The plastic door, its hinges broken, closed slowly without a sound, leaving only a tiny crack to look through. The smell of cheap soap and the damp floor of that cramped space stirred painful memories. That was where I used to cry in silence when Robert forgot to pay the water bill and we went without water for days. But I was no longer the wife who cried. Now I was a hunter hiding in the wolf's den. Robert's footsteps echoed heavily across the cracked tiles. He came in whistling, a careless whistle. Damn this dump, he complained out loud. Hot, filthy, and cramped. Thank God I'll be rid of this wretched hole soon. Through the narrow crack, I saw the shadow of his back pass by. He was wearing an expensive-looking silk shirt, undoubtedly bought with the $12 million advance I myself had transferred to him the day before. The irony. Insulting the place where we had lived together, with my own money. Robert Pierce began rummaging through the dining room drawers. Where the hell is the storage key? I swear I left it here yesterday. My heart pounded violently. In my hand, I clenched the handkerchief containing the arsenic powder. If he walked into the kitchen, or worse, into the bathroom, it would all be over. He would find me hiding with an unknown man and my plan would shatter. Cross pressed his index finger to his lips, signaling me not to breathe. His eyes were alert, his hands still inside his jacket, ready. Suddenly, Robert's phone rang sharply. "Hello?" He answered arrogantly. "Yes, project manager. What do you mean you're short on materials?" Robert roared. "Buy them. I already transferred the money. Don't bother me with details." He slammed his hand against the desk. "I'm not a laborer anymore. I'm a chief executive." He hung up angrily. Then his gaze stopped on a nail in the wall near the exit. There was the key. He grabbed it without looking toward the kitchen, turned around and left. We heard the front door slam shut and seconds later the sound of the motorcycle pulling away. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the damp bathroom floor. They would not hold me. Cross rushed to help me up and brushed the dust off my expensive dress. "Are you all right, President?" he asked, clearly worried. I nodded as I caught my breath. The fear slowly dissipated, replaced by a wave of hatred. I had heard every single word. A filthy shack. That was what he called the place where we had tried to build a home. "Let's get out of here, Mr. Cross," I said coldly. "We have the evidence. Now it's his turn to feel pain." Back in my office, I didn't waste a single minute. The poisonous powder was delivered to a private forensic laboratory to ensure the chain of custody. It was time to play my role as an investor. I sat in the main office chair and stared at the screen displaying Robert's real estate project data. "What's the status of the permits?" I asked Cross. "Everything is set, President," he replied. "The City of Chicago Department of Planning will withhold the construction permit for his project site, citing an old property dispute. The official suspension notice will reach his desk later this afternoon." "Perfect," I said, allowing a faint smile. He had already purchased materials, rented heavy machinery, and paid advances to workers with my money. If the project stopped, that capital would evaporate. "And according to the contract," Cross continued, "if the project is delayed more than 2 weeks, he must return the capital plus an additional penalty. He'll be completely cornered." "That's not enough," I interrupted. I picked up a new prepaid phone. I wanted to destroy his mind before I destroyed his wallet. I opened the messaging app, dialed Robert's number and typed a short sentence, carefully designed to steal his sleep. "Darling Robert, the herbal tea you prepared for me was delicious. It's a shame the jar broke in the kitchen, but don't worry. I kept what was left safe." I hit send. Elsewhere in the city, in his newly rented office, Robert was leaning back with his feet on the desk. He felt on top of the world. His new secretary had just brought him coffee. The phone vibrated. He assumed it was something trivial. He picked it up, unlocked it, and read. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened as he recognized the words herbal tea and broken jar. The cup slipped from his hand and the coffee spilled onto the floor and his shoes. "No, this can't be," he groaned. "Who are you?" He replied with trembling fingers. The response arrived instantly. It wasn't a text but a photograph. A white handkerchief with yellowish powder on a tile floor that was far too familiar. Beneath it a line. "Your wife sends her regards from hell." Panicked, Robert hurled the phone against the wall. His breathing turned erratic. Cold sweat ran down his temples. He was certain Valerie Reed was dead. He had left her dying. It was impossible she had survived. So who was this? A ghost? Or someone else who knew his secret? There was a knock on the office door. "Who is it?" he screamed hysterically. An employee entered, pale-faced. "Sir, a notice has arrived from the City of Chicago Department of Planning. They inform us that the project has been temporarily suspended due to an issue with the land titles." Robert collapsed into his chair. His head felt ready to explode. On one side, the terror of a ghost. On the other, the collapse of his business. It was as if the walls were slowly closing in, pushing him toward madness. In my office, I watched as the message appeared marked as read. I muted the phone. He was already trapped in the spiral of fear. Mr. Cross, I said quietly. Prepare the car. I want to visit our panicked investor as Regina, to show him my disappointment with his poor performance. Cross smiled calmly. You truly know how to torture people, President. I learned from the best, I replied, looking at a half-burned wedding photograph. I didn't yet know that Robert, cornered, was about to do something far more dangerous than poisoning a drink. Where in the world are you watching us from today? Leave your city in the comments. We'd love to know. That afternoon, heavy rain fell over Chicago, Illinois. At the hospital's information desk, Robert Pierce looked like a ghost. His once immaculate hair was matted, his eyes bloodshot, his breathing ragged. Check again, miss. He shouted, slamming his hand against the marble. My wife's name is Valerie Reed. She was admitted to the emergency room 2 weeks ago. I need the death certificate to claim the insurance. The nurse typed with trembling hands. I'm sorry, sir. I've checked the database several times. There is no record of a patient by that name having died on those dates. You're lying. Robert screamed. He grabbed her by the uniform, but 2 security guards immediately restrained him. Let me go. My wife died here. He shouted, pointing toward the empty emergency corridor. I left her there. You probably hid the body or threw it into a river. Robert yelled as they held him back. Sir, if you don't calm down, we will call the police, one of the guards warned as they dragged him out of the lobby. They shoved him into the parking lot and threw him onto the muddy ground. Robert ended up sitting on the hard asphalt. The rain soaked him instantly. The cold seeped in, but it was nothing compared to the terror freezing his blood. Non-existent records. If Valerie Reed was not listed as deceased, it meant she was still alive. How was that possible? She had been dying. She had no money. Who had helped her? And that threatening message. The photo of the poisonous powder. A chill ran down his spine. He ran his hands through his hair in desperation. The idea of Valerie returning from the grave to take revenge haunted him relentlessly. He felt eyes watching him from every dark corner of the parking lot. In the middle of his panic, his phone vibrated in the pocket of his soaked jacket. He pulled it out with trembling hands. On the screen appeared the name that had now become his other great source of terror. Office of President Regina. He swallowed hard and answered. Yes. Mr. Pierce, said a female voice, cold and professional. On behalf of President Regina, we inform you that your project has been officially suspended by the City of Chicago Department of Planning as of today. In accordance with Clause 2 of Chapter 5 of the contract, your company is in default. Robert's heart skipped. Wait, miss, I can explain. It's just an administrative issue. President Regina does not require explanations. The voice cut him off. She demands the immediate return of her investment. Robert felt the air leave his lungs. How much are we talking about? The invested capital amounts to $12 million, plus a 20% penalty, for a total of $14 million. There was a brief pause. The deadline is tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. If the funds have not been transferred, our legal team will proceed with the seizure of all your personal assets and file a lawsuit for investment fraud. The call ended. Robert stood motionless in the rain. The phone slipped from his hand and fell into a puddle. $14 million by tomorrow. He opened his banking app on the cracked screen. Only $60,000 remained. The rest he had squandered on the luxury office, the sports car, online gambling, and gifts for Paula. He was ruined. Completely finished. If he didn't pay, he would go to prison. And if the police investigated his finances, the trail of the arsenic purchase could surface. If the ghost of Valerie reported him, prison or death. There was no other way out. He staggered to his car, got in, and slammed the door shut, cutting himself off from the world. In the silence of the cabin, he slammed the steering wheel in rage. He cursed the project manager, the City of Chicago Department of Planning, Valerie, for not dying quickly, and above all, that woman, Regina. Because of that insane investor I'm like this, he muttered with hatred. She trapped me with a devilish contract. He stared at the rain-fogged windshield, and a dark thought crossed his mind, more sinister than when he had decided to poison Valerie. If Regina died, the contract could be voided, or at least cause enough chaos to give him time to flee the country. Regina was single with no husband or children. If she disappeared, who would claim the debt? He opened the glove compartment. Hidden inside was a folding tactical knife he had bought for show. He pulled out the gleaming blade. "You think you can trample me, Regina?" he whispered to his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face no longer showed fear but the resolve of a cornered man. He remembered that the following night Regina would host a gala to celebrate the acquisition of her new building, the same building that housed the club where he had been partying. She had invited all her business partners, including him. It was the perfect opportunity, amid the crowd or when that woman let her guard down backstage. "I'll shut you up forever, Regina," he growled. "And then I'll find Valerie's body and reduce it to ashes." He started the car. The engine's roar sounded savage, matching the dark intent that now ruled his soul. Robert did not know that he was not planning the murder of a stranger, but marching straight toward the gallows his own wife had prepared. In the distance, inside a black sedan parked out of his sight, I lowered the binoculars. "He has entered the phase of total loss of control, President," Cross reported from the front seat. "He's very dangerous." "Let him be," I replied coldly. "A drowning man clings to anything. Reinforce security for tomorrow night's event, but leave a small gap." I paused. "I want him to get close." "That's risky," Cross warned. "I want to see his eyes when he discovers whom he is trying to kill." "Mr. Cross, I want him to see Valerie inside Regina before I destroy him." Our car moved on slowly, leaving Robert behind as he sharpened his knife in the darkness. The grand hall of the skyscraper had been transformed into an ocean of opulence. Hundreds of guests, officials, top-level executives and members of high society, mingled with champagne flutes in hand, glittering beneath the light of an immense chandelier. The soft melody of the orchestra wrapped the room in elegance, but it clashed brutally with the storm roaring in Robert's chest. He entered with trembling legs. The tuxedo felt like it was tightening around his neck and cold sweat ran relentlessly down his back. Despite the air conditioning at full blast, his eyes did not linger on the imported luxury floral arrangements. They swept the room desperately, searching for his target. His right hand, buried in his jacket pocket, gripped the handle of the sharpened knife. Tonight it had to end, he repeated to himself to drive away the fear. Kill Regina, create chaos, and escape through the emergency exit. Across the hall rose an imposing stage. And there she was. Regina wore a gold evening gown that hugged her figure perfectly, shining like a goddess among the crowd. She laughed with several foreign investors, confident, distant, untouchable. Robert's blood boiled. That woman had destroyed him. That woman had condemned him to be haunted by his wife's ghost. Suddenly the lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. The music stopped. Regina stepped up to the microphone with a steady smile, her lips painted a deep red. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening," her voice rang out clear and majestic. "Thank you for joining me to celebrate the acquisition of this building." Robert began forcing his way through the crowd, moving closer to the front of the stage. The distance shrank to barely 15 feet. He calculated instinctively, 3 running steps, a leap, a direct strike to the neck, fast and lethal. "But tonight," Regina continued, "is not only about business. It is also about revealing the truth." Her eyes suddenly locked onto Robert, frozen among the crowd. The gaze was sharp, piercing, disturbingly familiar. "I would like to invite to the stage one of my business partners. Someone who has taught me the true meaning of patience and suffering. Mr. Robert Pierce, please come up." Robert's heart seemed to stop. The spotlight snapped onto him. Deafening applause filled the hall. He froze for a split second. He hadn't expected this. But his criminal mind turned shock into opportunity. He wouldn't have to evade security. He had been summoned. With a stiff, forced smile he climbed the steps. His hand stayed in his pocket, clenched around the knife. "You asked for this, Regina. You're digging your own grave," he thought. When he took his place beside her, her perfume reached him. Lilies and lavender. He froze. That scent. Why did it remind him of the cheap detergent Valerie used to buy? "Mr. Pierce," Regina whispered, low enough that only he could hear. You look nervous. Afraid of seeing a ghost? Robert stiffened. Cut the nonsense, he growled. You bitch. She let out a soft, cold laugh and turned to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the man standing beside me has an extraordinary business plan, she said. Unfortunately, his morals are non-existent. She snapped her fingers. Play the recording. The giant screen behind the stage lit up. Instead of financial charts, an audio waveform appeared. A second later, Robert's own voice, recorded at the club, filled the hall. Of course, Paula. Do you really think she could have survived? Her kidneys were destroyed. Her liver was inflamed. I turned off my phone so they wouldn't charge me for handling the body. After she ruined my life. May she burn in hell. Silence fell like a tombstone. Hundreds of eyes locked onto Robert, filled with horror and disgust. His face shifted from pale to furious, then to absolute humiliation. You set me up? He screamed. His sanity snapped. Die. He pulled the knife from his pocket. The blade flashed under the lights. Panicked screams erupted across the room. Robert lunged at Regina, aiming straight for her chest. She didn't step back. She didn't blink. Just before the blade touched the gold fabric, a powerful hand seized Robert's wrist from behind. Cross appeared like a shadow. He twisted the arm hard. A sickening crack echoed. The knife clattered onto the stage with a metallic ring. Robert howled. Cross forced him to his knees. Regina watched the helpless man at her feet and raised her hand, signaling him to wait. She bent down, her face level with her husband's, soaked in sweat and tears. Trying to kill me again, sweetheart? She asked, her sweetness laced with venom. Panting, Robert lifted his head. What are you talking about? Calmly, Regina reached up and removed the diamond pin holding her elaborate bun. Her black hair fell over her shoulders. She took a small cloth from Cross's pocket and with a firm motion, wiped the makeup from her right cheek. A small mole was revealed. A mole Robert knew all too well. The same eyes that had looked at him with love for 5 years now pierced him without mercy. Look at me carefully, Robert Pierce, she said in Valerie's original voice. The gentle accent was back, dripping with venom. I'm not a ghost. I'm the wife you tried to poison. The wife you abandoned in a hospital corridor. Robert's eyes flew open. His mouth moved but no sound came out. The truth was too monstrous for his mind. The powerful Regina was Valerie. Valerie, he whispered. His entire body trembled, not from pain but from a terror that crushed his soul. Chow. Valerie smiled. A real smile. She leaned close to his ear. Welcome to the hell you created yourself, my husband, she said calmly. And look who came to see you off. Valerie pointed to the main doors of the hall, now wide open. A group of uniformed police officers marched in, metal handcuffs ready. But they weren't what finally broke Robert. Behind them, a forensic technician held up a glass jar containing the remains of the poisonous powder. The net of the law was closing around him. There was no escape. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, capturing the most humiliating moment of Robert Pierce's life. The man who minutes earlier had felt untouchable now lay on the stage floor, handcuffed, his back arched. His face was shattered, not by blows but by a truth too heavy to bear. 2 officers grabbed him by the shoulders to haul him up. Robert struggled. His red, tear-filled eyes searched the room for a way out that didn't exist. When his gaze met mine, he stopped fighting. There was no hatred left, only pleading. The same calculating look that had softened me so many times before. Valerie, honey. His voice cracked. Please, I was wrong. We were poor, I lost my head. I did all this so we could have a better life. You love me, right? Remember our vows, for richer, for poorer. I looked down at him from the height of my heels, my face empty of emotion. No heartbeat quickened. No tremor. My heart was silent, cold and still like a frozen lake that no longer reacts to anything. I stepped forward. Cross tried to stop me but I raised my hand. It was fine. I stood before the man who had once been my entire world. Wedding vows. I repeated slowly, my voice firm, loud enough for everyone to hear. You poisoned those vows yourself, spoonful by spoonful, every night for 6 months. It was just a sedative, Valerie, I swear, he babbled in panic. The tests don't lie. Neither does your recorded voice, I cut him off. I leaned in until I was face to face with his trembling eyes. I don't hate you for being poor. I hate you because you made me feel worthless. Because you made me believe I deserved to die. Honey, please. Robert sobbed as the police began dragging him away. Don't do this. I'm your husband. I didn't look away. I didn't react. I watched him disappear amid the boos of the guests until the double doors slammed shut behind him. Silence. For a few seconds the hall stood frozen. Then applause began, hesitant at first, then louder until it became thunder. They weren't applauding the spectacle. They were applauding the ending. They were applauding justice. Cross stepped up and offered me a glass of water. The police have also arrested Paula at Robert Pierce's former office. She tried to delete the computer files, but our tech team was faster. She'll be charged with conspiracy to commit murder and embezzlement. I took a sip. Good. Make sure they both end up in the most uncomfortable cell possible. Already done, President. The best legal team will make sure they never see freedom again. I nodded. Victory was sweet, but it left a bitter aftertaste. The Valerie who believed love could fix everything died that night, along with Robert. The next morning, the sky over Chicago was clear, as if celebrating my freedom. I stood in a private cemetery, the grass perfectly manicured. Before me were two black marble headstones side by side, my biological parents' names engraved in gold. I laid down a bouquet of white lilies. The wind stirred my black veil. Mom. I whispered. Valerie finally made it. I'm sorry it took so long. The road was long and painful. I pressed a hand to my chest. My body was healed, but the scar on my soul would be permanent. I would never love with the same innocence again. Trust had become a luxury. A few steps away, Cross held a black umbrella, even though the sun shone brightly. President Reed, he said quietly. The shareholders' meeting begins in 1 hour. They're waiting for your direction as the new leader of Sullivan Medical Group. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of earth and fresh grass. I closed my eyes for a moment and said goodbye to Valerie Reed, the wife from the rented apartment. When I opened them, she was gone. Let's go, Mr. Cross, I said, turning away. As I walked toward the limousine, I left the past behind, buried beside the silent stones. Don't call me Valerie Reed anymore, I said calmly. Call me President Regina. Valerie is finally at rest. A new world awaited me. And this time I was in control. If you enjoyed this story, please support us by subscribing to the channel and giving it a like. Tell us in the comments what you thought of the ending. Turn on notifications so you don't miss anything that's coming next.